At this time, let's begin today's event. Once again, how empathy is redefining leadership. It is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Christina Cleveland, Senior Director, Talent Development Solutions at Canadian Management Center. She has experience leading global project teams through complex leadership development implementations and partners with CMC clients to consult through the analysis and development of their leadership strategies. Christina, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Jess, and hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. We're very excited to welcome you here. We've got over 1,000 people that are registered for today's event. For those of you who are new to Canadian Management Center, and this is your first webinar with us, you may not be familiar with our organization, but we are a national provider of professional skills development training, and our focus is on preparing the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And we are the Canadian affiliate of the AMA Global Network, which is one of the largest knowledge networks in the world, which gives us the opportunity to bring you new research and information on best practices and emerging trends that are impacting individuals and organizations. So we're thrilled to be with you today to talk about this essential topic on how empathy is redefining leadership. If you do have access to social media and you are on Twitter, you're welcome to join the conversation with us and follow us with our handle at Canadian Management. And for those of you who are wondering whether or not you'll get access to the slides for today, we will be sending you an email with a follow-up that will have access to a link that will give you the ability to be able to not only hear the session, but also receive a copy of the visual of the slides with the webinar recording. I am joined today by our speaker, Sheila Jaggard, who is a CMC facilitator, longtime CMC facilitator. And I'm thrilled to welcome Sheila because she is a passionate advocate for the topics of emotional intelligence, of which empathy is a large component. Sheila has her PhD in Human and Organizational Systems, as well as her Master's of Arts in Organizational Development. But she also brings over 25 years of business experience herself as a leader, as an executive coach, and in a variety of different industries and sectors. We regard Sheila as an agent of change as well as personal transformation, and she has over many years continued to build her portfolio of certifications and research of her own to continue her own interest in this topic, and she's able to integrate that into the examples that she provides to our participants, gets rave reviews on our in-classroom sessions, and we're really excited to welcome her today. So since we have so much content to cover, Sheila, it's such a big topic, I'll just pass things immediately over to you and welcome you for today's session.
Well, thank you, Christina. No pressure on that intro, so thank you very much. I would like to welcome everyone, and hello, everyone. We have a large crowd that's coming in today, and I am thrilled about that because that just tells me that people are really interested in this notion of empathy and how we can actually use it in leadership and actually connect with the people that we work with. So today we're going to talk about empathy and how it's redefining successful leadership and how that really kind of looks in the organization. And as experts in the area of management and leadership development, we're excited to be sharing this research because there's neuroscience behind the power of empathy, as well as some of the practical tools. We'll give you some of those today so you can take those away and become a more empathetic leader and ultimately gain some greater influence with those you need to collaborate with, but also those you need to connect with in the organization. So let's just take a minute and take a look at the definition of empathy. It's the ability to identify with the emotional state of others in a way that builds connection. It creates safety and it enables trust. You know, the interesting thing about this idea of being able to connect with the emotional state of others is that really and truly, we're human beings first. We're a lot of other things on top of that, but we're human beings first. And so as humans, we have this emotional side to ourselves. You know, the interesting thing about being a leader and being able to demonstrate empathy is the way that we can actually use this empathetic approach to understand the people that work with us, the people who work for us, and the people that we're trying to connect with within the organization. You know, recent studies that look at the effects of empathy in a business context are demonstrating that empathy has the power to drive measurable results. I invite you to take a moment to think about a leader you've really trusted and admired. someone who motivated you to work to your potential. And if you take a second to identify some of the things that they did to earn your trust and your respect, I think you'll find some of these things listed on this slide. So, great leaders are self-aware. Great leaders listen. And I don't mean just casually listen, I mean truly listen. Great leaders provide support, they provide focus for your strengths, and they appreciate your contributions. They're honest and transparent. And you know, the interesting thing about this is that they do all this with seemingly no real need to emphasize that they're doing this. It's because they understand it naturally. Now, that doesn't mean that empathy can't be taught and that empathy can't be learned, but there is this part of them that is actually empathetic. So while empathy has always been an important element in great leadership, you know, I can remember back when Daniel Goleman actually released Emotional Intelligence. Yes, I am of that era. And I remember when he brought it out, a lot of the senior executives poo-pooed it as being, you know, oh, it's that fluffy stuff, and what do we need to do that? We just need results. We just need people to be doing work. Well, fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden people are jumping on the bandwagon with Daniel, and now, of course, Daniel has the empire of emotional intelligence. In fact, Christine and I were talking about the number of different books he has and the number of ways that he's using emotional intelligence. We are, after all, emotional beings first, and we need to pay attention to that. So the workplace, as we know it, has been rapidly changing. And, you know, there are no signs of it slowing down. In fact, sometimes I think it speeds up, and it's at breakneck speed. In fact, someone used to say to me at one of the organizations that they worked at that they started out on skateboards, and now they've gone way past skateboards, and they're into those floating boards that just take off on their own. That's how fast we're moving. So in the face of organizational demands and constant change, a global and increasingly remote workforce, in fact, some of these people you've never seen, and stressed out employees, we'll see that our success will be defined by our ability to influence people. And the way that we can influence people through all of this is the way in which we can depend on the natural relationship that we're going to have with them. You know, the natural relationship means there's a connection. They expect to have communication. You know, in fact, the new millennials are actually looking at ways that they can have honest and authentic conversations with the people that they report to. It matters most to them. And then the other generations are looking for meaningful work and ways that they can engage meaningfully in the workplace. Work that aligns with their strength and the difference that they want to make, and the contribution not just in the workplace, but to the world. You know, when you think about the success that we want to have, empathetic leaders have the advantage. And you have the advantage because you're able to connect with people in a very different way. Now it's your turn to participate. We're going to do a poll. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a moment, read the four different comments here, and select the one that's the greatest challenge for you.
So this will be interesting. The poll's opening on the right-hand side of your screen, so we'd ask you to just take a minute to participate so we have a chance to get some feedback from you. And I'm sure you're missing, you'd love to see option E, which said all of the above, because I'm sure at different points we're struggling with each of these elements. But we're really asking you to focus on identifying what's the greatest challenge for you currently, so that we can try to address the relation of what we're talking about today to that current challenge. So we'll just give it another second for that poll to be open, and while I have the opportunity, I do want to let you know that there is a Q&A panel where we'll invite you to submit any questions that you have for Sheila, and we'll try to integrate those into the session today. There is already a question connected to trying to identify for senior leaders that this stuff is important and not fluffy. So it's interesting that you used that word fluffy, Sheila. I'm sure that that's what triggered that question. So we will come back to that. So Jess, we can go ahead and close out the poll to see what participants have indicated is the greatest challenge. So whether it's increasing organizational demands, constant change, team members who are global or remote, or team members who are highly stressed. So we're just in the process of wrapping that up to be able to get the results. So we'll just give it another second. It looks like our leader is increasing organizational demand. So 41% of those participating on the line today, Sheila, are indicating that that is a challenge. Second to that, team members who are highly stressed at 27%, and then a close third, constant change at 23%.
Yeah, you know, those are interesting results. The organizational demands, you know, part of this is because of the restructuring of organizations, and organizations are actually looking at ways that they can reduce the number of people they actually have. And of course, we know that when there's a reduction, it means some people will have to do more work. And the organizational demands are also about the short turnaround. You know, everything has to be done in a second. You know, that's not the way things get done at their best. And so that just adds to your stress. You know, just reading that, you know, makes your heart palpate, because you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have to get this done by this hour, or I have to get this done yesterday. So this organizational demand is so widespread and so far-reaching. Where does empathy come in? Well, you know, it's about understanding that people have perhaps some time constraints. Perhaps they have some issues around some of the changes that are taking place in the organization. And sometimes the demand that they have, if they could just go and talk to a colleague, it would be so much better. But the other colleague also is just as stressed by that. So part of this is about being able to find an opportunity to have that conversation. And the conversation comes when you can actually say to somebody, you know what, I just need 3 minutes of your time. And we'll talk about some more tools as we go on. Thanks very much, everybody, for participating in that. And, of course, we saw that stress was right up there as well. Well, we know that, you know, stress is, it's perennial, but it's also at times more, it increases more, and at other times it's a little bit less. But, you know, in 2013, Stats Canada did a study, and they said that 62% of Canadians identify work as their number one source of stress. Now, I'm guessing that that percentage is much higher now, just because of the nature of the workplace, and we saw the demands, so we're reasonably sure that's a higher number. So what does stressful environment lead to? Oh, my goodness. You know, decreased productivity, overwhelm, lack of focus, inability to prioritize, and that goes back to the organizational demands, increased illness, absenteeism, turnover. And by the way, those illnesses are not just a cold. Those illnesses are really quite significant. Missed deadlines, work delays, increased costs, low trust. The disengagement is a huge one for me, because when people actually disengage, it means that something has gotten so large that they can't possibly pay attention. And then there's a lack of creativity and innovation, and, you know, I think that that's one of the things we really need to pay attention to in this day and age. So how do we connect with people when they're facing these kinds of things? Well, empathetic leadership means that we know how to connect with people when they're in this state of resistance or fear or stress. And we need to know how, in fact, we can talk to these people, how we can build teamwork and collaborate. It comes back to listening. It comes back to using that empathetic part of yourself. And empathy is the gateway to results. Empathy has the power to cut through the stress. It connects people. It provides safety and trust. And, you know, if you've ever had a really, truly empathetic leader, you understand that you can actually go to them and you can have that conversation. But, you know, there's also a part of this that is foundational, and that's the brain science. That provides insight to how our brain responds in times of stress and how empathy can interrupt the stress cycle. Stress affects our thinking and behavior from the functioning of our brain. And, of course, I love doing work around the brain, Christina, as you know. I'm a brain junkie, so I love to talk about the brain. So let's talk about the brain and how, in fact, we can use these parts of our brain to recognize when we're in a hugely stressful situation and how we can get to our empathy. Well, the brain has three parts, as you probably all know. The reptilian brain is the instinctual brain. That's the brain that's the fight or flight part of our brain. And, there's not a lot of higher order thinking then. When you think about instinctual, it's just an automatic response. The mammalian, or the limbic brain, is the emotional level of our brain. And it's the place that generates powerful feelings. So that's our emotional center. And then we have the primate brain, and that's the neocortex. And it's where the logical or rational level of the brain resides. And it operates consciously, taking in data from, of course, the reptilian and the mammalian. But the interesting thing is, it analyzes the information, and it tries to make smart, well-informed decisions based on the information that it's fed. Now, normally, these three parts of the brain work together. However, there are times when higher order thinking isn't accessed because the instinctual brain is in such a state of flurry and such a state of stress. And that stressed out environment can create a constant change that's going on, and the reptilian brain jumps forward and says, essentially, I'll save you. I know how I can save you. I'll take care of you. So when you think about your reptilian brain taking over, it should actually kind of startle us to realize we have control over all these parts of our brain. We just need to be conscious of it. So when the primitive parts of the brain take over in times of stress, you may experience things that leave you wondering, what actually happened to my intelligence quota or my brain? I don't understand why this is happening. Well, have you ever felt feelings of panic at work? Prime example is when your boss asks you to come and meet them in your office, meet you in their office, and all of a sudden you go into this panic mode. It could be that they're trying to congratulate you for something you've done, but no, our brain immediately goes to the reptilian brain. Have you ever had difficulty breathing normally or focusing on a major presentation, interview, or other high-stakes event? It's really interesting how this happens, because the difficulty breathing is because once we tap into our primitive brain, what happens is all the blood gets sent to the area of our body that can actually service us, and that's the fight or flight. So I think I need to run from this. Well, the interesting thing is you stop breathing, and by the way, I do this a lot. I was saying to Christina, in every single course I do, I teach people how to breathe. That sounds so silly, doesn't it? But it's true. We stop breathing when we're stressed or challenged. Have you ever written an angry email response to someone? I'm sure none of you have, but I can tell you from having done this, after you send the email and you go back and you reread it, you realize you've missed the most important part of it. So what's happened is that's a big oops. So any of these can actually affect another part of your brain called the amygdala, and that's what we call an amygdala hijack. So where's the amygdala? Well, the amygdala is in really the center of your brain. It's a small region, and it's in the limbic area of your brain. It activates whenever there's a sense of a threat, or, even when your logical brain can go on alert, the amygdala kicks in. And the amygdala, by the way, does not differentiate between a threat to our physical survival or a threat to social safety or the safety of our ego. It just knows fear and anxiety. Well, when you take a look at today's environment, we have to think about what actually is going on. Back in the days of the cave people, it was fight or flight. There was a saber-toothed tiger coming at them. Well, we don't have saber-toothed tigers that are four-legged. I think we may have some saber-toothed tigers that are two-legged. But here's the interesting thing. When you think about your workplace right now, and I'm going to invite you to put some comments in the chat if you would, because I love to connect with you people. When you think about some of the saber-toothed tigers you have around you in the workplace, what kinds of examples can you give me? One of the ones that comes to mind immediately for me is the unreasonable client. I have no idea why I'm saying that. It just comes to mind right away. So what kinds of things have some of you run up against in terms of the saber-toothed tiger activity?
So we welcome you to participate in the chat panel and send us your thoughts. Just go into the chat panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can send your comments directly to me, Christina Cleveland, so that we can share them back with Sheila. And again, we've got some great questions that are already coming in, but I think, I love the analogy, Sheila, just that some of the saber-toothed tigers may be two-legged, and I think the example of when you get a call from your boss that asks you to come see them, immediately the response goes to it's negative, it's bad, you start sweating from different places, and you get concerned about what the conversation is actually going to look like. So I think that that's a great example of something that just starts to take over our brains and starts to turn off the rational thought and functional thinking and puts us into survival mode.
And the thing that's really interesting is that it happens without our knowledge a lot of the time. We can actually have experiences that take place, and when we have these experiences, we don't recognize, this is actually happening to me. I'm diuresing, I'm sweating like crazy, and so we need to pay attention to that.
Right. So just as a reminder, we had a question about what the question was. So the question was asking you to identify for us what are the things in your work environment today that might trigger a threat response for you or might trigger an amygdala hijack. So some of the examples that are coming in right now, Sheila, are intolerant people.
Oh, yes.
Overly critical or gossipy people. A selfish manager. Highly charged clients that might have visions and ideas that you may need to deny or re-explain in order to get a point across to them.
Right.
So the unreasonable client, as you mentioned. So several examples, unrealistic deadlines coming in as an example of something that could trigger an amygdala hijack. Difficult conversations or performance reviews, judgmental colleagues.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Well, thank you. Oh, and they're still coming in. Liars. Woo. Wow. You know what? This says so much about where we are in organizations today. We seem to have lost that social ability to be almost patient and kind with each other. And being able to be patient and kind is a way that we can look at this. And you know what? Here's the thing about, thank you all so much for all the things that are coming in, because I will say this to you, our challenge is to get to our rational mind. So when you're dealing with some of these people who are, difficult to work with, they're gossips, they're always negative, even to the point of rudeness. And when you think about some of these people, it really is about you taking care of you. And the way you can take care of you is to be able to look at what's actually going on and say, you know what, I can take care of myself, and it is about paying attention consciously to what's actually happening around you. And just because these people are in your workplace doesn't mean that you have to respond to them. Thank you ever so much. For me, it kind of begs the question, what can we do to help our primitive brain and re-engage rational thinking so that we are able to deal with these? So we have a second poll.
Yeah, so we would love to get more feedback from you. So in thinking about some of the examples that you shared with us, our question is, which of the following is the most effective way to diffuse an amygdala hijack in yourself? So when you have those scenarios where you've got unrealistic timelines, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or you have a boss that's showing up at your door with a question. We had a few other contributions come in with somebody asking or indicating that you may have a senior leader who only wants to hear the answers that they want to hear. That could trigger an amygdala hijack. So what is the technique that you use? Are you trying to take some long, deep breaths? Are you telling yourself that everything's going to be okay, so you're giving yourself some reassurance so that you can try and re-engage that primate brain? Are you removing yourself from the environment or situation? Or are you talking to someone that you trust? Do you have someone that you can trust that you might be able to talk to? So we'll just ask you to, again, respond to the poll that's on the right-hand side of your screen. And then, Jess, let's go ahead and close out the poll as results are coming in here so that we can take a look at what our techniques are. And I would imagine, Sheila, in some cases, it might depend on the situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I guess the thing that comes to mind first for me is in terms of taking some long, deep breaths, I think the first thing that we have to do is just stop. We just have to stop. And sometimes what we have to stop is being able to remove ourselves, and we have to stop the inputs that are coming towards us. And one of the easy ways, of course, is to take a deep breath. By the way, your mother was quite correct when she said take a deep breath and count to 10, because that is essentially a way to calm yourself down. Remember, you're trying to get yourself out of the hijack.
Right.
And so what you're really trying to do is get to your rational brain, and the way you get to your rational brain is by giving it some oxygen, number one. And number two, just being able to take hold of this whole situation. So what have we got here?
So our results are showing us that number one strategy, 43% of those participating today indicating taking a time out from the situation.
Love it.
And second to that is talking to someone you trust.
Perfect.
So I would agree, Sheila, that removing yourself from the environment gives you a chance to not engage in a conversation or discussion when you may be experiencing an amygdala hijack, giving you a chance to, again, just calm down. But I will also say no one ever calmed down from being told to calm down.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that that's a strategy, frankly. But, how many people tell you to calm down? I would say to you that this taking time out, here's my advice. Get outdoors. Deep breathe while you're outdoors, different energy, different environment. Walk. Get your energy moving within you, and when you take the time out, take a time out. Don't get right back on your device of whatever type, and don't get back on the computer right away, and certainly take it easy, take some time, and by the way, you'd be amazed at how quickly you can get back into shape. So I totally agree. Taking a time out works, and talking to someone you trust really is helpful. One thing that I just want to say about talking to someone you trust, when you think about the people you trust and the people that you can talk to that can actually talk you down, part of this is about being able to recognize that they're available to do that. Because sometimes you catch them at a time when they're not so available either. But what we need to be able to do is kind of step back and say, I really need you for just 2 or 3 minutes, because it doesn't take long to download that. The other thing is that, with this thought series that CMC has done around The Secret to Getting Through to Anyone by Dr. Mark Goldston, there's a lot of positive things in there about actually hearing yourself. What is it that's actually being said in your own head? Are you agreeing with what they said? And if that's the case, you're just hijacking yourself as well.
Well, and I wonder, just based on the definition that you shared earlier, Sheila, as it relates to empathy and whether or not the 24% of people who responded to talking to someone that you trust, whether or not empathy was also a characteristic that you see within those individuals. So they're relating to you.
Yes, and you know what? If you see the empathy in them, when you need to have that reassurance, you're going to go there. And wouldn't you like to be the person, that people see that in? And I will say that, this whole notion of being trustworthy, in a world where it seems that people aren't trusting, it would be just such a wonderful thing to have people trust you enough to come and say, I just need 2 minutes of your time. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody, for responding to that. So, when we think about what empathy is, we certainly probably have a lot of examples about what empathetic leadership is not. And, from my experience, I have, in fact, seen a lot of the situations and been involved in a lot of situations where, empathy was not foremost. It was actually get the work done and make sure that you get it in on time and you get it done perfectly and all of those kinds of things. And I will say, in the earlier stages of my career, when I was just starting out, I didn't understand what empathy really was. But as I think I got older and understood a bit more about what people really need, I understood more about this, walking in someone else's shoes, not being in sympathy. And I need to make that very clear. Empathy is not sympathy. And I had an experience, recently where I had a client that we were going to do a project with them. They told me that the project was going on the shelf. I went to talk to my business partner. And I have to admit, I was a little off the dial in terms of my disappointment. And I went to talk to my business partner, and what I didn't do was I didn't say to her, do you have a minute to talk? So she was in this place where she couldn't take her mind away from what she was doing, so she wasn't able to be helpful to me. And that just frustrated me more. So then I went out for a walk, and blessedly, the weather was great, and I was able to get out and actually work it through on my own. But when I went back, here's what happened. She came to me immediately and said, I'm so sorry. I was just so wrapped up in this piece of work I had to do. And I said, here's the interesting thing. I should have asked. And I didn't ask. So I encourage you, when you are going to go and talk to someone, ask them first. Do they have some time that they can actually work with you on this? And if not, go for the walk. Get out of the office. Get out in some fresh air and see if that helps you. I will tell you, though, retrospectively, I just wanted some help, and I wasn't able to see the other person. And sometimes I think we need to pay attention to what's going on with the other person. The other thing is, many times when you go to someone and you tell them, I just need a couple minutes, they try to solve it for you. And it's not about solving it. It's just about listening. So part of this is about being able to build those listening skills. And I can tell you that, the listening is not in judgment. The listening is simply listening. It's that notion of venting to somebody. Don't you think? Like sometimes I think we just need to download to somebody, and if we could just download, then we'd be fine. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't be a mess by the time we leave. But the truth of the matter is, there are a few behaviors that fall for me into the category of what empathy is not. The first one is pretending to listen. Those are the people that sit behind the desk and their eyes are always going to the computer while you're talking to them. Or the people that say, oh, just a minute, because they have to answer their device. Not listening. Only occasionally showing interest. When it serves them, they'll show interest to you and what's going on in your life. Being empathetic to some employees and not to others. It's about fairness. And always being in a hurry. I love those people that charge around the office like the Mad Hatter. You know that they're never going to take the time. Keeping your own emotions and vulnerabilities a secret. When you have someone that you're trying to go to and you want to talk to them and hoping that they're going to be empathetic and you have no idea of anything about them and you're expecting them to be empathetic. And then delivering messages with sympathy, and then there's this underlying sarcasm. I'm sure, many of you have seen these, but I can tell you this. These do not promote a compromise of trust and safety. They have a negative influence on any kind of relationships and certainly on engagement, and negative impact on business results. And by the way, sooner or later, people just don't go to them. They find somebody else. So I think they may be listed in some of those saber-toothed two-leggeds that we saw earlier.
So, Sheila, can I just ask us to pause there for a minute? Point number 5, keeping your own emotions and vulnerabilities a secret. I think that this is an area that could be challenging for some leaders who may feel like they have to inspire hope in other individuals, or maybe not share that they see negative things happening within their environment, or they may feel that they're not comfortable or not able to express vulnerabilities because they're the leader. Mm-hmm. So could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, for years we've talked about the mask of work and how people wear a mask when they're at work, and if their kids actually walked into their workplace, they wouldn't recognize them because they're so different than who they are at home. And many times that is because they don't feel safe in the organization. The idea of actually letting people know your emotion and your vulnerability isn't about giving a weakness. It's about helping people to understand who you are as a person. So it's not about revealing your deepest, darkest secrets. It is about being able to say, you know what, I truly care about what's going on. And I care about what's going on with you, and I care about this situation. Now, there are short-term situations you can deal with, but in the long term, it is about letting people know who you really are. I always kind of joke about it, saying that, up until my 49th year, I was very much wearing the mask, but when I turned 50, I said, what you see is what you get. And I wish I had done that earlier, because not being open to showing your emotions is not going to be helpful to those people that work with you. In fact, if people can see your emotion, it actually helps people to connect with you.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. And I've got some comments from individuals who are looking for clarity on that point, Sheila, so thank you for spending a little bit of time there. And
Perfect. I hope that helped.
Well, and I think the showing some vulnerability allows people to mirror that back to you, so it creates some permission space really for them to understand that they can offload a little too.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're going to the dark doldrums with them, but it
Right.
does mean that you're meeting them where they are and giving them an opportunity to open up and share as well, which could take us into this next point.
That's right. The number one characteristic, according to Google, in high-performing teams is psychological safety. Team members feel safe and take risks, and they'll be vulnerable in front of each other when they feel safe. And this notion of feeling safe is this sense that I'm not going to see what I'm saying show up on the intranet at work, or I'm not going to have somebody make fun of me because I happen to be particularly emotional about something. When you think about how we are reacting to things that are going on and what our emotion is, it really is important that we pay attention to the fact that we're in judgment easily 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. We judge everything. And if we can just step back and say, you know what, there's nothing to judge here. Someone is having a particularly difficult situation, and I'm here to help. And so what can I do to help them? And part of this is about realizing also that this person may want you to help them. They don't want you to solve the situation. So, when you're asking if we should have solutions to everything, the solution around empathy is hearing what they have to say.
Right.
Because everybody has it within them to solve it. It's just we need to get them there.
And this connection to psychological safety, Sheila, I think the results that kind of connect in as a result of creating psychological safety is the opportunity where people feel there's more innovation that can be derived, there's better decisions that can be made.
Oh, sure.
We're not triggering those threat responses or creating those amygdala hijacks. So I would encourage you to take a look. Of course, you can Google the results of this study. It was a 2-year study that was conducted by Google, and the results were released last year. And there are top 5 characteristics, but psychological safety emerged as the number one. So I would definitely encourage you as it relates to creating an environment that can be more empathetic. And the fact that many people on the line indicated that amygdala hijacks could be initiated as a result of judgment. Right. So to your point, if in an environment where there's psychological safety, we know that we can take risks, make mistakes, ask questions without judgment.
Right. And this notion of being able to be empathetic is about giving people the opportunity to take the risk. And if they make a mistake, that's okay. It's when they repeatedly make the mistake that we have the issue, and we can correct that by having some performance management discussions. So what are the top 3 do's in empathetic leadership? Well, keep an open mind. This whole notion of keeping your mind open to anything that comes along and not jumping to conclusions is extremely important. And that goes back to the whole judgment piece. Become open to hearing what people have to say and knowing you don't have to solve it. That's the biggest piece about this. The second piece is acknowledge what the other person is experiencing. Again, I want to talk a little bit here about sympathy. Sympathy is feeling badly about something. Empathy is helping people to connect with each other. Acknowledging what the other person is feeling and experiencing doesn't mean you have to climb into the experience or the feeling with them. It simply means that you can acknowledge. And you acknowledge by saying, you appear to be, or you seem to be, or you are demonstrating. It is about them. It's not about, oh, I feel so badly. That's sympathy. Empathy is the you phrase. And then resist the urge to fix. You know, that's what managers love to do, isn't it? Don't we love to fix things? We just love to get in there and fix it. And you know what? Many times we jump in to fix things and the person knows how to fix it. They just needed to talk to somebody. So we need to step back and think particularly about what is it we're trying to fix. Are we trying to fix them, or are we trying to fix something that we think we need to pay attention to? So acknowledging what might be going on in the other person's world is not the same as making excuses for them. This comes up because I know there's a lot of people that say, you know, well, that's just fine to be empathetic, but what happens when, you know, they're not performing? Or what happens when they're not doing their job? Or what happens when they're not able to get the deadline that they hit the deadline they're supposed to meet? Acknowledging what might be going on in the other person's world is giving them the opportunity to talk to you on that level, but it doesn't mean that they really move away from any responsibility whatsoever. That's not what this is about. Until the person feels heard, they're less likely to buy into any kind of solutions or recommendations or conversation. They need to be heard. We all like to be heard.
So I do want to just jump into some Q&A, Sheila, if that's okay, because
Sure.
We've got some great questions that are coming in.
Okay.
And one seems to be connected to what we just talked about, and two people asked this question, so Paul and Rizwan. So the question is, what do you do when people take advantage of your empathy? So as a leader, you may be showing some empathetic leadership, and they may be taking advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're always going to have those people, aren't we? I mean, there's always going to be someone who believes that they can do this. The notion of empathy is that that's who you are as a human. And if they take advantage of it, that is about them. It's not about you. And people who take advantage of your empathetic nature, perhaps one of the things that you can do is stand back from what they're actually saying to you and doing with you and take stock of it. Because maybe what they're really doing is they're just utilizing you as a venting machine, not a venting machine. And maybe what you can do is stand back and say, this is interesting. This person's coming to me for an empathetic response. What is my empathetic response? So remember, when we're talking about the brain, you have that capability to go to the conscious self and say, this is a very interesting response. I would turn and I would say to them, you seem to be, I don't know, bringing forward an issue that is important to you. What do you think would be the best response?
Okay.
That way it's not falling back on you, and you're not feeling that you've been used or that they're taking your ideas and running with them. Isn't that funny? We had that conversation earlier. I would turn it on them, and I would say, what do you think you need to do? The other thing that about people using it, you know, people will go along and say, well, so-and-so told me to do such and such. That gets back to, if you're trying to solve the problem, they will say that you told them to do something. So don't solve the problem.
Right. Okay. Great advice. So second question coming in from Wayne. It sounds like we've got many people on the line who are converted to understanding the value and importance of empathy.
Yay!
But this question is, how do we get our boss to be more empathetic with us? So the big question. So how do we get our boss or bosses, leaders, senior leaders, to be more empathetic with us?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you talk about your bosses because here's what so some of you that are on the webinar today know me, and you know that I'm a DISC performer. I'm a DISC proponent. Everyone is different. Everyone has a different way of looking at things. You know, here's the thing about a non-empathetic boss. You believe they're not empathetic because they're not dealing with you in the way in which you want to be dealt with. They may be a polar opposite personality type. They may be a polar opposite individual in terms of how they think of things. It doesn't make them bad or wrong. It just means they look at the world differently. And so part of this is, what do you need? If you need your boss to be empathetic with some of the things that are going on, perhaps you can display for them role model, and even model for them what kind of behavior you're looking for. I always found that, and I have had some non-empathetic leaders that I've worked with, and I will tell you that when I actually was able to role model for them how, in fact, we could deal with this, they actually, over time, don't expect an overnight sensation here, but over time, they were able to see it. I will also tell you that one of the major turning points for me in terms of empathy was when I experienced some of the things that the people that worked with me had experienced. So, for example, I never quite understood the whole thing of sick time and bereavement time when someone in the family died until, of course, I had my father die. And then as I was curled in a little heap for a month, I said, oh, so this is what that's about. You know, sometimes you have to be in it and experience it before you can understand it. And so sometimes we have leaders who have not experienced it. And so it is about giving some cues to how that could work. The other thing that I might just say about leaders who are not empathetic, and I know this will sound just silly, but one of the things that I always like to do was leave a book on my desk. And there's all kinds of books out now. I would leave a book on my desk that talks about, leadership traits. And then when they see it on your desk, or you can even say to them in a conversation, read this great book, and it's all about some of the things that they found in research. And one of the things that they found is empathy is really important. Bring it up. Have the conversation. Sometimes just having the conversation opens people's eyes.
Well, even using today's webinar as an example, I was
Perfect.
on a webinar today, and it was talking about this and being able to share that. And I think having some understanding of an amygdala hijack when it relates to your leader and, appreciating from a compassionate place about what they may be going through. So they may not understand your stress and challenges just the same as we may not understand their stress and challenges, and that they could be experiencing an amygdala hijack, which could be getting in the way of their listening or their ability to be able to connect in with us.
You know, one of my favorite sayings is you never know what's happened to somebody 5 minutes before you've talked to them. So you have no idea, really, what's going on with them. So I totally agree.
Okay. So still some great questions coming in, and I do want to come back to the questions.
Look at them all.
But I know that you have a piece that you wanted to wrap up with too, Sheila, so I'm going to make sure that I try to balance all the needs on the line.
Yes.
There was one question about what is the name of the Google report. So that point that we made about psychological safety.
Yes.
So again, if you just Google psychological safety and look at the actual results, there's a Huffington Post article. There's also an article by the Associated Press. If you search the title, Google has discovered 5 key traits employees need to succeed, you'll get access to the entire results and overview and a little bit more information on psychological safety, why that's important, and what that's doing within their corporate culture. So there was a question that was asked about, how do you influence empathy or create an empathetic culture from the bottom up?
Well, you know what's really interesting? Frontline folks have a lot of empathy because they're dealing with the clients. When they're dealing with your client base, when they're dealing with the customers, when they're dealing with the issues that people are bringing forward, they're the first line in terms of empathy. And it is about hearing them. And, there's so many opportunities to actually demonstrate empathy and to celebrate empathy, and I don't mean celebrate as in, woohoo, I'm the empathetic person of the day. I don't mean that. I mean celebrate empathy as a value in the organization. The culture will follow the values. So if you have values, and of course we know this is another problem in organizations, if you have a value that says empathy, then it means that there's a spotlight shone on it. So pay attention to that, whatever that might be. The other thing that you can do in a culture is look at ways that you can demonstrate empathy and see if, in fact, those are things that other people in the organization have experienced. So you can now start a groundswell of people moving this forward.
Right. Well, and so the questions keep coming in, so people are obviously hanging on to the idea here about being able to lead this message up through their organization, Sheila. So question in terms of positioning, do you recommend forwarding the recording of the webinar to our leader, or how could you position that in a way that they might receive it, to receive the message well?
Okay. So a couple of things that I would do. The first thing that I would do is when you receive this, if you work on a team, then I would say to the team, okay, I tuned into this webinar and this woman told me I had to do this, because I'm now saying it on the webinar, so you can actually legitimately say, Dr. Sheila Jaggard said you had to do this. So there you are, there's your marching orders. So you can do that with your team. Then when you meet with your next level up, whichever level that is, you can actually say to them, I'd like to show you this webinar. It's an hour in length. I know that you're very busy, but I'd really like to show this to you because I'd like to be able to do this with my team. So bring it back to your team. And then I would never send it off on your own, just firing it off, unless, of course, the person is already in an empathetic. If they are an emotionally intelligent person, by all means, fire it off to them. They might be interested in it. But if you're trying to get a point across, you need to do the steps.
Right.
The other thing that you can do is you could actually, if you have any kind of staff forums or you have any group meetings, you can actually ask if you can take snippets from it. And then you can send out the deck.
Right. That's great. And we actually have a participant who indicated, I believe it's pronounced Mehdi, said, my boss passed by my computer and I told him what I was listening to right now. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh, good for you. Well done.
So a great way to be able to connect in. So just coming back to our key messages, Sheila, in terms of empathetic leaders and what they do to enable results. The research continues to emerge about the importance and value of empathy. So for those of you who are looking for some hard stats on why empathy is not fluffy, there are a lot of organizations, competitors of yours, that may actually be engaging more empathetic practices in their leadership, and that's a great opportunity to be able to get your boss's attention.
Yeah, it's interesting that the conversations now that are out there, and particularly in the online world, about caring about each other and caring for the people that work with you, because in the tough times they're going to be there for you, and you need to be there for them. So empathetic leaders make others feel safe, and it's not only as safe as in, I feel safe in my workplace. It's safe to take a risk. It's safe to make mistakes and admit that they've made mistakes. Empathetic leaders reduce stress. They don't increase it by running around like the Mad Hatter. They re-engage minds. This goes back to this notion of consciousness. Re-engaging the mind is getting out of the amygdala hijack, getting out of the reptilian brain, and actually consciously having conversation. And then, of course, there's creating social bonds. Creating bonds with each other is so important, and it's going to matter in the long term. And then, of course, building trust. And we all know that building trust takes time, and it can be gone in a blink. So if you're building trust, stay at it and be consistent, because that makes a huge difference. So that's it. There's so much more we could talk about. You and I said we could talk about this for days, but I hope that you really have had some thinking go on here, because that's really what this is about. We can answer a few more questions probably, but I just wanted to say that it's been my pleasure and privilege to be with you all this afternoon, and I do hope that I see you at a CMC course in the near future. And Christine, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Sheila. So another question that has come in from a participant is, how could you use empathy to restart a relationship that might be broken?
Yes, I noticed somebody was talking about not just work. And certainly we need to have empathy in our families. There's no question about that. But, to restart a relationship, it is about apology and forgiveness. It was funny. I was saying this earlier. A colleague had a call from somebody that they hadn't talked to in 10 years, and this person was apologizing for something that happened 10 years ago, and this person said to me, well, I'd forgotten about it, and I said, forgiveness. It's never, ever, ever too late to forgive somebody. And so this is a huge part of the whole empathetic side of things. You know, nobody's perfect. Mm-hmm. I know we like to think we are, but we're not. And so we have our moments where we really could use someone who could support us, somebody who could keep us in a place of feeling safe and feeling secure. And I encourage you to be that way with others. And if you want to get a relationship back on track, my suggestion is that you take a look at the behavior that created the problem. Mm-hmm. Because 9 times out of 10, if you'd looked at it from the human side, it would have been a different answer.
And parking that ego would be a significant component for that.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So there's been a couple of questions, and I'm not sure that we're going to have time to unpack that completely, Sheila, but question about technical professionals or people who might have more significant challenges. The term narcissistic had been used, and whether or not you can expect empathy from individuals who might not be able to express emotion. So I think the two are distinct between technical professionals and a more challenging personality disorder.
Yes, yes, that is a disorder we don't. Yes. So let me just say this: we're all humans. So, and to be fair, everyone has the potential for an empathetic response. Whether someone is working in a job that is very task-oriented and doesn't require a lot of emotion, doesn't mean that they don't have emotion. It doesn't mean that they don't have empathy within them. It just means that the work that they're doing or the direction that they've decided to take is from a task base. And I will say this, we all have the capability of having an empathetic response. One of the things that we have to be able to do is to give space to some people who may take a little longer to come up with the empathetic response. I remember many, many years ago thinking to myself, boy, somebody that I actually was going out with, and I thought, do you have an emotional bone in your body? And I remember saying that out loud to this person, and this person said, well, it's just not the same as yours. So sometimes we need to pay attention to what people are saying to get that notion of where their empathetic piece lies. For the narcissist, there's EAP. That's my pat response for anything like that. There's EAP. There's also, the recognition that people are who they are. And what we need to be is who we need to be, want to be, and expect to be in the world.
And I do have a link up to the free resources section of our website. We have several articles that are posted connected into this topic, connected into the art of listening and being able to get through to anyone, and also some resources from Dr. Mark Goulston who might be able to support a little bit more on that question. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Goulston is the author of the book Just Listen, Discover the Secret to Getting Through to Absolutely Anyone. And to explore more on the topic of empathy, this particular 2-day program does go into more depth on the power of empathy and how you can actually apply it. But there are some free resources, including a couple of chapter previews for this resource on our website that you can check out at cmcoutperform.com in their free resources section. We'd also encourage you to take a look at some of the courses that we have, again, that continue to unpack this topic of empathy and emotional intelligence. And as Sheila said, she'd love to be able to see you in one of the upcoming sessions, and you can spend a little bit more time with her, because you can tell just from this particular session that she's absolutely passionate about this topic, and she has more to offer to us. We are interested in hearing what you have to share with us in terms of feedback on other webinar topics that you might be interested in, so we welcome your feedback. You can feel free to enter that into the chat panel, but we'll also be asking you for feedback once you wrap up today's session. We do welcome you to come back to our website at cmcoutperform.com to find out about future webinars that we have planned. So we do have an annual calendar of sessions that we'll be promoting, so you can always get up-to-date information from our website. But at this point, Sheila, I do want to thank you so much for your time, your insights, and the expertise that you shared with us. It was definitely an hour of power, so thank you so much for your contributions.
Thanks so much for asking me. I'm thrilled to have been here, and thank you all for your comments.
Thank you.